welcome into Gray Television's Media Days Craze. How y'all feeling? Day 2, we got a good lineup. We have Oklahoma.
It's a beautiful venue, first of all. Having it at the Omni Hotel in Dallas, it really is amazing.
I mean, Texas is a fun time, Will.
Yeah, this is my 12th SEC Media Days. So this is about as well done as any of them have been. So they've done a fantastic job here at the Omni.
I'm Bailey, right?
12 and first time, so...
This is my first time here.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of Big 12 Media Days, which actually is in Dallas as well, but this is 10 times better. I'm Bailey Burmaster, Aaron Mukes, Will West. Thank you guys for joining us. We're going to talk all Day 2 has to offer. We have Oklahoma in the mix today. We have Tennessee in the mix, Missouri, and then, of course, we have to talk about national championship favorite Georgia. Let's talk about these preseason rankings a little bit and where we see these teams and if we agree or disagree, so to speak. So you got Georgia, Texas, Alabama. I thought it was interesting Texas was over Alabama. I thought it was a little disrespectful to the Tide.
I mean, when you look at where Texas was last year, obviously the coaching change, I think, was a big thing. You lose Saban, even though Kalen DeBoer showed that he was able to take a team to a national championship game. I think that Texas probably deserves to be there just based on that alone. But Alabama's always going to be in the mix, and I don't think SEC or anybody really wanted to put Alabama too far, and that reflects at number 3.
Yeah, new systems, right? So there's going to be growing pains. There's going to be a learning curve, I think, a little bit. And the other side of it is, remember, with the schedules, they're not equitable like they used to be. Used to, the SEC West played the SEC West. The SEC East played the SEC East, and then your cross opponent. Now it's all over the place. Alabama has an incredibly difficult schedule this year. Texas, pretty easy. So I do think that plays a part of it too, is that most people think Texas 11-1, Alabama 10-2.
And it's wild because there are schedules for some of these teams that I'm like, that's a gauntlet. Like Georgia has a gauntlet of a schedule too.
They do. Oklahoma does as well. Yeah.
And I can't remember if it was Ole Miss or Mizzou. Maybe I'll have to look it up. But kind of has a cupcake.
Oh, they're
schedule.
playing high school teams. Yeah, it's incredible.
Like it's like Georgia Southern and like and you're like, what are we doing? Like you're going okay, so you're automatically a shoo-in for the new 12-team playoff format.
Yeah, and then you get those teams, they're playing, like Georgia, the tough ones, they're playing at home. Yeah. So it is a nice schedule for teams like Ole Miss.
It's very interesting. Ole Miss comes at 4, LSU 5, Mizzou 6. Are we buying into the Rebels stock this year? Because I think I might be.
I know I am. I am buying into their stock. I think what Lane has been able to do there, specifically over the past couple of seasons in the transfer portal,
65 in the last 3 years. That's insane.
He just has a way with getting these guys to come there, and I think we're going to see that kind of come together this year. And I definitely think they're a playoff team. Now, can they get beyond that and over the hump? We'll have to see, but they're definitely a playoff team.
They're one of those teams that has an easy schedule as well. Ole Miss, Missouri both have incredibly easy schedules compared to what they've had in the past. So this year's Ole Miss team could be a team that would be 9-3, 8-4 in a normal year in the SEC West, and you could go 10-2 this year just because of the strength of schedule not being that high. I mean, if you look at the total win totals, I believe that Vegas has for most of the teams on Ole Miss schedule, I want to say they play 2 teams that has more than an 8 win total. So you're playing LSU, you're playing Georgia, and then a lot of teams that you're going to be a double-digit favorite against.
Is Mizzou a dark horse in the SEC this year? They're coming off that massive win in the Cotton Bowl over Ohio State. They have one of the more prolific offenses in the conference. And, I mean, you don't want to overlook them, but at the same time, they kind of put everyone on notice last year. They went from being unranked to one of the top 10 teams. And
they did a great job in the transfer portal. They didn't bring in a ton of guys, but the guys they did bring in really panned out for them. They also have Brady Cook, who's a fantastic quarterback. Luther Burden probably is going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft. So if you can block, you can tackle, and then you have great skill position players, you're going to do pretty well. How do they replace Cody Schrader? That's going to be the one thing that I wonder with them, because I thought he did a fantastic job with some of that outside zone stuff that Missouri likes to run.
I think defensively, losing the defensive coordinator might cause some problems there on the defensive side of the football. Like you said, offensively, with Luther Burden, the best wide receiver in the game to me. I think they're going to be explosive, as we've seen in the past, and they're going to give team fits no matter what.
Whose seat is the hottest? When you look at, is it Vanderbilt, South Carolina?
Billy Napier at Florida.
I was about to say.
Because that is a gauntlet of you want to talk about gauntlet of a schedule. That is a gauntlet of a schedule. I think they play the AFC North. You know what I mean? It's they're outside of the state of Florida. It's incredible how difficult the schedule is. He kind of made mistakes, I think, in the way that he started with NIL of we're not going to do NIL for the first year. So he's a year behind in his recruiting cycle. They're in the blue chip ratio if you look at the number of 4- and 5-star guys that they have on their roster from a talent perspective, but they're all young. and you have a brutal schedule. The offensive system he's trying to use is very conservative. Graham Mertz is kind of a West Coast quarterback or a game manager quarterback, and I just don't know that Florida's even going to get to 6-6 this year. And does he survive if that happens?
Are we sold on Graham Mertz?
I think he is what he is.
Immediately shook his head.
No, I mean, I don't think there's anything special there. Like you said, He is what he is. And I think that's kind of the Florida team in general, right? There's nothing that we can really point to and say they're really great at this and this is what they're going to present. And I think when you're in a conference like the SEC, you just can't have that. You have to be special at something. We see the Georgia defenses or the Alabama defenses of the past or the Ole Miss offense, LSU's offense from last year. If you don't have something special to point to, you're going to struggle in this conference.
I think he's a quarterback that won't lose you games, but he's definitely not going to win you games either.
No.
So if you have a strong running game and then he's running play action, I think you can be fine there. But look what this conference is right now, especially you're adding Texas and Oklahoma to it. So you have Jackson Arnold and a really nice offensive system at Oklahoma. We'll see if they run the same system they did last year. Texas has Quinn Ewers, who's going to be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft. So you had those guys, plus Alabama is going to be even more offensive with Kalen DeBoer there. Tennessee is going to run 96 plays a game. That's what they're going to do. LSU promoted their passing game coordinator to offensive coordinator this year, and he's going to throw the ball all over the yard. So if you're the team that's conservative offensively, you have to be great on the ground or you have to be great defensively, and I don't think Florida's either one of those things. So then you'll be starting from behind. Can Graham Mertz throw the ball 40 times a game and win for you if you're Florida? I don't think that's the case.
I want to dive into every team that's here for day 2 of SEC Media Days, but before we do that, I want to recap Commissioner Greg Sankey and some of the things that I thought he talked about yesterday that were very intriguing. The first one is 16 teams, no divisions. He was pressed multiple times in a row. Is it going to stay 16 teams? And he kind of was stern in his answer while also beating around the bush of it's 16 today and 16 tomorrow. And someone even asked for clarification of, okay, well, does that mean tomorrow as in tomorrow or like the future of tomorrow? And there was still no clear answer. What do you make? You think there's more teams to come to the SEC in the near future?
I think it's inevitable. I think he said what he had to say, right? You're not going to get up there and say, yeah, we're going to get more teams in here. I think it was appropriate for kind of the landscape of yesterday. But I think we're all on the same page. We know that this conference is going to continue to expand. There's already talks of the Florida States and the Clemsons going through their stuff in the ACC. So it's not a shock to me if in a few years we're talking about more teams added to this conference.
I think that they're staying at 16 until their television partners tell them to not stay at 16, and there's enough money that can be brought in right now. So I think his plan is to stay at 16, but I don't think any of us know. I mean, coming up this fall in this academic year, you have to pay $2.8 billion out. College football does to past players, plus $22 million per year out to current players and student athletes. So where are you going to be financially? If you find yourself where you're in a place where, and we still don't know if there won't be more lawsuits beyond that, we just know this is where it ends so far. So I think that right now he would like to stay at 16, and he's happy at 16, but does the ground shift underneath him and force him to have to take on more teams? Remember, Kyle Whittingham said last week at Big 12 Media Days, we're 2 to 5 years away from having 2 20-team super conferences. Kyle Whittingham's that kind of guy that throws things out like that. So the Utah coach. So I think that they're at 16 now, but do I think they'll be at 16 in 5 years? Absolutely not.
And it's so funny. Someone brought up a great point yesterday. It was like 3 years ago, if you would have said this would be the new future, you go, no, you're crazy. And now we're all like, it's probably just going to be one big super conference, and we're all going to figure it out from there and whatnot. Something else he brought up that was interesting, obviously, comm system now, and also the iPads. How do we see the iPads making a big impact in the game now?
I think it'll be big for the players. I think Kirby talked about this when he was up there. The coaches are communicating. They've got guys, eyes in the sky. They've already seen stuff. But having adjustments on the fly for players to see visually what the mistakes are, what they can adjust on, is going to be huge on the sidelines. This is something, to me, that should have happened a long time ago. The fact that they were in this kind of Stone Age mentality of not using technology. When we watch high school football teams having this stuff available on the sidelines, for me, it's a positive thing. It's going to take some time for the players to get used to, but I think it's an exciting thing for the players to kind of be able to navigate the adjustments they need to make in-game. And it kind of takes away from the coaches a little bit. They don't have to be, I guess, as smart in their game planning and making changes on the fly.
You'll see more in-game, in drive, in-quarter changes as opposed to waiting to making adjustments at the half. That's the way that we see it in the NFL because they're going to use the iPads and they can get the position groups together and say, okay, this isn't working, we're doing this. I think we'll see the same thing in college football, is that you'll see more in-game changes as opposed to halftime.
And isn't that the crazy thing? I feel like just in the last year alone, we have pushed the college game so much closer to the NFL game. I think about that in terms of it's going to be a longer season with the 12-team format for playoffs. And I was talking to Kirby earlier, but I asked him, I was like, do you change what you do? Because the season's longer. You're going to get injured. How do you? And they said they are definitely going to change what they do for preseason and make it lighter because it's now more about longevity. Do we like that it's going closer to the NFL, or do we wish it was more kind of the old school college days?
From a business model, I think it's the smart move.
Yeah.
It's look at the NFL. I think last year, 93 of the top 100 television broadcasts in America in 2023 were NFL games. So that's the right move from a business perspective. I also think that you're preparing these kids for the league and speaking to agents and things like that throughout my career. The number one reason that a kid chooses to go to a college is they'll get me ready for the NFL. So I think you have to move scheme closer to the NFL. You have to move everything business-wise closer to what the NFL is doing right now. But there are fans who are – it's college football steeped in tradition. There are fans who are going to be upset that it's going to be more and more like pro football, but I don't think that they're going to put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah, the diehard fans that want to see the traditions, I think they're always just going to be on that side of it. But you talk about moving it closer to the NFL game. I mean, NIL is as close to free agency right now as you're going to probably get.
It's messier than free agency.
It is. It is. And the players are taking advantage of it, but that is breeding into the NFL. Like, you can see that landscape starting to shift that way. Again, I think it's a positive as well. That season becoming long, getting these players to play 15 games now, if you're going to the national championship, maybe 16 games, that's close to an NFL regular season. It's going to prepare them from a physical and a mental mindset. Does it have any long-term kind of effects? Or we'll have to wait and see for that.
You'll play more guys on your roster.
Yeah.
That's the one big
depth
thing that's going to happen is that right now you see there are a lot of young guys that don't play a lot. You'll see younger guys. I think,
how
play
much
more.
is that going to expose some of these teams in the SEC?
Probably a good bit.
Because I could look at all those teams in the 16. I'm going at least 8 probably past some of their starters.
Yeah, top heavy. If the teams that
you
are
ain't
top
got
heavy
the depth that you
struggle.
think
No,
you do.
not at all. Not at all.
And I think that's worrisome. And I also think going off of NIL and going more towards the college game, there's that fine line of these athletes. I do think as a college athlete, these athletes should get paid. They should get their slice of the pie. But they also don't want to be seen as an employee of the university. And there's a very fine line there. And it's interesting to see how this will all progress. And, I asked Kirby today. I thought we were talking about NIL, and I just said, as we get our boots more wet in this, what's been the hardest part of this that you kind of didn't see? He was like, recruiting. And he didn't even call it conversations. He's like, they're negotiations. And it takes away to where, yes, we're going to give money to the people who should be getting the money and are going to be on the field. But at the same point, like, I'm selling you on Georgia. If you're not going to get here and do what you need to do at the end of the day, then what are we doing?
And a lot of it right now is them making sure they keep their current players on their roster. And then it just seems like within the transfer portal, everybody just trades backups. And can I get something out of this backup? Maybe you can get something out of the backup that I didn't have. And they're handing out $200,000-$300,000 to back up offensive linemen right now to try to find someone that can be a starter. And other than that, you just bring your guys in and because high school recruits are all making about the same amount of money.
Yeah, when you, I think one of the biggest things that it doesn't get talked about very often, but when you translate this game to the NFL game is the fact of the backups leaving because they're not getting playing time or they're not on the field. I've heard mixed feelings. Some coaches like it, some coaches don't.
It's soft. I'm old school.
It's soft. I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
So I played soccer at Oklahoma State. I walked on, but by my senior year I was a full ride. And there was a point where I wanted to transfer, and my parents were like, that's not how we do it. You're going to stick it out. And I was like, all right, well, I guess we're going to do this. And I'm so, looking back, it taught me so much, but also I'm happy I stuck it out for my own reasons. And I ended up being a part of the team and being captain my senior year and making an impact. And it meant a lot more. And it also taught me about just perseverance in life. Yeah. But now it's like, oh, well, I'm not getting what I need here. I'll just go somewhere else.
It's business,
it
right?
Is.
And it's like I cover Tennessee. They had a basketball player, Jonas Sadu, who left and went to Arkansas. I don't know, this was football media days, but he was going to make about triple the amount of money to go to Arkansas with John Calipari. How do you make the decision, try to stick it out with, even if you love the coach, when there's that much money on the table?
But I think that's the hard part for me. That is a 5% reality for everyone that plays college sports.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe I'm saying this because I'm a woman, but you think the women athletes are getting these deals? Maybe the Livy Dunn Okay, like
Very
once.
few.
Yeah.
Correct.
Very few.
It's not the, but it's not the reality for a lot of the football guys too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Garrett Nussmeyer actually spoke yesterday about how he stuck behind Jaden Daniels, and that he had opportunities to transfer, but he just didn't want to. He felt like he got a calling. This was supposed to be where he was at, and he didn't want to take the easy road. He wanted to compete, and I think that's big. I think that says a lot about the player he is, and I would like to see more of that in college football. I think it's kind of going away from that, but I do respect the players that stick it out, that want to make an impact, and then by their senior year, when they do get their opportunity, they take advantage of it. And we see sometimes sitting on the bench actually helps you learn and you grow, and then you're more mature.
I mean, it makes me think of Joe Burrow a little bit.
Yep.
I mean, that's that model, right? And I guess I low-key just called him soft, going back to that area. But you know, he reaped the benefits of it, and it worked out for him. So you have, at the end of the day, you have to do what's best for you, and I'm not going to be mad at anyone for chasing the bag, but I do think it's just a change of the times, and it's very interesting to see how it progresses, and I don't know what the future holds, and I don't know what it looks like, but I think, you know, it was interesting. Sankey was talking about how, you know, on their student-athlete panel, a lot of them, they would talk to the athletes, and it was like, what do you want? And they want it to be across the board even, because it's not with different state legislation. I think that was fair, and they also still wanted it to be competitive, and I liked that. How true can we stay to those pillars? I think remains to be seen.
Yeah, well, especially there's no salary cap, players aren't employees, there's no collective bargaining agreement, so it's like an NFL free agency, but with no parameters whatsoever.
Yeah.
Free for all.
Free for all. All right, let's dive into some of these teams. Let's start with the top dog, no pun intended. National championship favorite, again, the Georgia Bulldogs. I mean, what can you not like about this team? Let's start with the quarterback, because Carson Beck decides to return. I asked him earlier what went into that. And he was like, why would I not want to return to a team like this? He goes, it was really hard to walk away from the players and the camaraderie and the atmosphere they have around this team. Now, he didn't say this, but I have a feeling losing that SEC championship to Alabama left a sour taste in his mouth, and he wanted to come back to prove something. But where do you see Carson Beck? There's a lot of talk that he could arguably be the best quarterback in the field this year. True or false?
Definitely true. Heisman Trophy candidate out of the gate. I think he has unfinished business, and I think that's really what it's about for him. When they walked off that field against Alabama, you could see it. They felt like they were the better team, and they just didn't play well that day. To me, Carson Beck does everything right. He speaks to the media right. He does everything right on the field. He's a leader of men in that locker room. I think his ceiling is exponentially through the roof. What he brings to this team is different than what they've had in the past than the Stetson Bennett. His size, his ability to throw the football from a talent perspective is bigger and better than what they've had.
His composure really, really impressed me last year.
He's never rattled, ever.
No.
He's pretty much even keel the entire game no matter what's going on. And for a team like Georgia, when you have so many talented players around you, you just need somebody that's that steady hand to just not allow the team to get too high or too low. And I think Carson does a good job of that.
I think right now we're picking like a kickball game on the playground in grade school. I would take Carson Beck as my quarterback over anybody else in the nation. Like, people talk about how off-platform throws and being able into mobility for a quarterback, and those things are great. 80% of the plays a quarterback makes are going to be in the pocket. So how quickly do you disseminate information? Do you have the arm strength to be able to go deep? He can do both of those. He understands his offense. He knows all of the if-then questions that you have within his offense with Mike Bobo. So I think Carson Beck's the start of it. Plus, he's a quarterback that has a great offensive line in front of him.
Yep.
And if you have even Tom Brady struggled at times when he didn't have an offensive line. Patrick Mahomes has struggled when he didn't have blocking in front of him.
But isn't that the age-old, like, how good is he when everything around you is also a Ferrari?
That's
so
football.
He
the ultimate team sport.
Like,
he just has to be
You're going to hate him for good circumstances?
Yeah, but he has to be efficient, and he is. So he does everything you need within that offense, and when something breaks down, he can make a play because of his arm strength. So I think Carson Beck's the dude.
I was really impressed. I don't want to say not sold. I just wanted to see a good sample size. And I think it was that Auburn game where it was a close game. He showed a lot of grit, was able to drive him down. But it was his composure that got me. And then as your season go on, you see him make these stupid throws to Lad McConkey, and you're like, okay,
where did that come from, right?
That was a zip.
Yeah,
that was a zip.
And you talk about circumstances. That game's circumstances were great. The defense couldn't stop the run. The quarterback was running all over them. And he had to make plays when it mattered, and he did. And I think those moments help his maturity. And now year 2 in the system of, being the starter and knowing he's the guy, he's been able to manage those expectations. And he spoke about this, talking about how he doesn't care about the individual accolades. He just knows when he puts his best foot forward and the team does well, that all of those other things will come. And I think that's the mindset you have to have.
So going into the 2024 season, do you believe that Georgia is the team to beat within the SEC?
Yeah, by a country mile. Honestly, I would be, if you gave me Georgia or the field to win the SEC this year, I'll take Georgia all day long. You have better players. You have the best coach. You probably have the best coach in the nation now that Nick Saban's retired. All of the pieces are there. Georgia definitely has.
We got to talk about that too, because obviously Kirby and Nick Saban are connected. And I was asking him, I was just like, how different does today feel, given that, you know, Saban's hung up his whistle, he's taken a mic, he's one of us now. And I was like, is it hard talking to him about Georgia? He goes, I had to do a 15-minute call with him, and I felt like I was giving secrets to Darth Vader. And I was like, that's a good soundbite. But can you blame him? You're so used to Saban low-key kind of handling you at points, and then he's no longer there. And now I think Kirby is arguably the best coach.
He's the guy. Well, especially the other guy, Jim Harbaugh's gone.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah.
So the other, he right now Dabo's not doing business in the new way. So that leaves Kirby, who has a ring that still is in college football right now.
What do you see from this Georgia defense? Are they going to be as powerful as we're used to seeing Georgia's defense? Even though last year they had moments early on where it was not the standard that it was. I think they were a few games without a turnover, and then finally something clicked mid-season.
Yeah, I think defensively they'll still be good. This team has had a way of sending guys to the NFL and then just replacing them. Mm-hmm. And actually, Mike Hill was talking about that earlier. It's just the next man mentality. And people are saying about how good he is. And he was like, man, they'll just replace me tomorrow with another guy that's just as good as me. And they've continued to do that. I think the one thing I want to see improvement from this year is the pressure. Defensively, they were 12th, I think, in creating tackles for losses and getting to the quarterback. And they still were the best defense in the SEC. So I think they're going to be strong again. They have a number of returning players. That defensive line should be stronger this year. But I think that pressure on the quarterback and generating those sacks and tackles for losses are going to be key.
Aaron mentioned it, right? You know what you get with a Kirby defense. We saw it when he was a defensive coordinator to now that he's at Georgia. Linebackers are going to be unbelievably disciplined. Corners are going to be physical. What happens on the defensive line? So can they improve even more on the defensive line? That just makes them even more dominant. And it's like, I don't know. It's like putting an extra couple guns on the Death Star, and you don't know what to do.
I'll be interested to see what happens at corner, too, as they figure out that position. But let's switch to offensive weapons. No Brock Bowers, no Ladd McConkey. Is it Dominic Lovett's year to step up?
Stacey Searles will have the offensive line right. They will run the football well, and if you can run the football and teams have to put 6 or 7 in the box, football's a numbers game these days, especially on the offensive side. So 6 guys are in the box, we do this. 7 guys are in the box, we do that. They will be able to run the football with that offensive line well enough that Carson Beck will probably, he could throw to me and Aaron, and I think that Georgia would be fine.
Hey, man, I did play wide receiver.
There you go.
Could you catch it?
I was a lineman, so.
But I think he said it. We've seen wide receivers come through Georgia, and it could be the 4th, 5th guy, and they're still making an impact. They're going to run the football. ETN transfers. He'll get some opportunities. I think Bell. I think Lovett. They had a transfer come in from Vandy. They're deep enough to where they're going to go and make plays. Yes, it hurts you lose Bowers. It hurts you lose Ladd McConkey. But I really was impressed with Oscar Delp when he came in for Brock last year. So having him.
High expectations for him.
Yeah, I think Georgia will be fine. They're going to throw to a number of guys. And, again, we speak about depth earlier. They're a team that has depth. They're going to use all their guys. And I think offensively they won't miss a beat.
Before we go talk Tennessee, I want to talk about the off-field issues with Georgia. Tickets in arrest are now up to 24 after 2 more were booked for speeding and racing last week. You know, I'm not even going to put this on Kirby because Kirby is ripping these guys any chance to be like, what are we doing? We've talked about this in depth. How do you get a rein on this, and how do you get through to these kids?
I think Kirby is and we have had him in Knoxville, these types of coaches. He is the kind of guy that I coach football. That's what I do. You guys handle this. Nick Saban was not that. Nick Saban was, you do this in my program, I'm going to come throw things at you. And so I think that there have been times that Lindell White, there's a story that's pretty famous in college football circles about Lindell White being at a party he didn't need to be at, and Pete Carroll showing up to the party at 1 a.m. I think Kirby's the kind of guy that we do this on the field and off the field. That's the schools. Kirby's going to have to step in a way that he probably doesn't want to, that he probably feels uncomfortable doing. But he's going to have to keep better tabs on his players and be the one that's the disciplinarian there, instead of leaving it to the portions of the school where the people are supposed to be the disciplinarians.
It's hard, I think, for Kirby, too. That I think he has that old school mentality, and now we talk about NIL. These kids have money now. They can go out and do things, have opportunities, and those opportunities kind of put you in a position to maybe you're doing things you shouldn't be doing. And like you mentioned, Kirby's going to have to step in at some point and say, hey, we're not going to tolerate this anymore. Again, it's not something he wants to do, but I think at some point he will have to do it. It's just it's the nature of the beast. The college kids have changed. I have a college kid myself. College kids have changed over time, their environment, their circumstances. These are young men that are just trying to learn how to live in the world. And sometimes it takes somebody at Kirby's stature to really get him in line. So he might have to take that opportunity.
I do wish that, like at the NFL, it's not Roger Goodell, or it's not the coach, it's not Mike Tomlin punishing an Antonio Brown. It's Roger Goodell. So at some point, when we, especially as the SEC makes more big business and we have more of an NFL model here, Greg Sankey or somebody in his office needs to step in on these types of situations. Situation we had with Oklahoma State, where the kid has a DUI, gets nothing.
Yeah.
And like where the Big 12 commissioner needs to be, you can't trust coaches because the coaches have a heart for the players. They're going to want the player they're going to believe the players.
Well,
and that you won't do it next time, right?
Well, let's talk about that. I went to Oklahoma State. I saw that and was like, oh no.
Yeah.
But I almost feel like that was more strategic on Gundy's part.
Oh, for sure.
Because all of a sudden, what are we talking about?
We're talking about
We're
that.
talking about Gundy.
Yeah.
We're not talking about Ollie anymore.
Yep.
And I thought that was honestly strategic of like, oh, he's saying, look over here and let's get this out of here.
Yeah, pretty strategic. But to your point, that's who's going to sanction it. Who's going to come down and lay down the hammer. Eventually somebody has to do it, or it's going to continue to get out of control. And we don't want to see these things happen. Nobody likes when somebody's getting arrested, or we saw what happened last year with Georgia. We just can't have situations like that continue to happen.
We're right across from the big SEC logo on the wall right now here at the Omni in Dallas. Somebody has to protect that shield the way that Roger Goodell protects the shield for the NFL.
Absolutely. Georgia's schedule, I want to rattle it off here before we move to Tennessee. They open up against Clemson, Tennessee Tech, at Kentucky, at Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State, at Texas. That is like the circled one for everyone in the SEC. Florida, at Ole Miss, another big one. Tennessee, UMass, and then they round out with Georgia Tech. Think about this. If they go on a national championship run and they make it to the big game, they will play at the Benz 4 times. They open against Clemson in the Aflac Kickoff Bowl, SEC Championship. The Peach Bowl is a semifinal, which is at the Benz, and then, guess what? You host another national championship, the first site to host it twice in Atlanta.
If they get through that schedule, on the road at Alabama, on the road at Texas, on the road at Ole Miss, they deserve it.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
I agree.
I'll say this. If anyone can get through that schedule, it's probably the Georgia Bulldogs.
Probably
That's
is.
right.
All right, let's pivot to Tennessee. They finished in the top 20 of the AP poll in back-to-back seasons, something that has not happened in 19 years. Do we give Josh Heupel enough credit?
Probably not. He's done an amazing job.
He really has.
And one thing that I don't think people know, 36 players left before he was hired because there were situations where, now would be a big deal, but Jeremy Pruitt and his coaching staff handing out Chick-fil-A bags full of cash to players, and then those players would have been ineligible, so they needed to transfer out. They did. So he started out with, 50 players or so on his roster and was able to win 7 games year 1, 11 games year 2. Last year, Tennessee won 9 games.
27 wins in
So
3 years.
the fact that he can do that with that roster in that situation, I will say he's doing it slowly in the way that he's rebuilding his roster. But his system's incredible. There's a reason why Brent Venables at Oklahoma went and hired Jeff Levy, because he wanted that system. Other people are coming in to Josh Heupel to try to learn his system. So the system is pretty incredible. It's taking what Art Briles did and then snapping the ball within 4 seconds if possible. And he has done just an incredible job at a place that with a proud tradition, great fans. But, man, Tennessee has been terrible. A lot of that, they kept hiring people no other SEC school would hire because they thought they were the smartest guy in the room. But Josh Heupel's done a pretty amazing job based on the roster that he's
I just feel like we don't talk about him enough, at least in the SEC. And
On
maybe
the podium today, he said this is his most complete depth-wise roster, and it's taken him 3 years to get to where he wanted to get. And I feel strongly that he's going to continue to grow this program. He's done a great job.
Outside of James Pierce, there seems to be a little bit concerned with his defense. What do you make of that, Will?
Well, the linebacking core should be great. It was bad last year, and you were playing freshmen because the linebackers you had weren't great. 2 years ago, you had to convert a running back to linebacker, and you literally had 2 healthy guys. You pulled a guy out of your SID's office that was a grad student that had a year of eligibility to be your third linebacker. That's what they had 2 years ago when they won 11 games.
Yeah.
Last season, you were playing freshman. So now you have Keenan Pili, who's back, who's like dang near my age, and he's like 26. And he's going to be back this year. Plus, you have Arian Carter, who's a monster, but he was a freshman last year. And so linebackers will be great. Defensive line, Amari Thomas is an NFL guy. They have a ton of depth there. James Pierce is going to be a top 5, top 10 pick in the draft. And then you get to the secondary. It's not going to be great. They don't have anyone who's really started. They have a guy named Christian Charles who would have been a starter and ended up tearing his Achilles. So he'll be a starter at one corner most likely. The rest of it, though, look, honestly, last year it was bad. And if the guys that are on the roster now couldn't beat the guys out last year, it makes you wonder how bad they are. But the second 2 years ago when Tennessee won 11 games, they had the 128th ranked pass defense in the nation.
Yep.
So Josh Heupel's offense can make up for the fact that your secondary is kind of an abomination.
Does it? I think some of that goes into the way they play offense, right? Because when their offense isn't clicking right out of the gate, they're 3 and out, they're 3 and out, they're 3 and out quick. Defense gets tired. It's hard to stop people. The back end specifically, which is why they struggle so much in the secondary. I guess one name that has been talked about a lot is Boo Carter. And as the freshman coming in, that might be able to help on that side of the ball. But I think the offensive style of Heupel is always going to lend to the defense probably not being that strong, at least statistically, because of the amount of offensive plays he's running and how quickly, when they do struggle offensively, they're going 3 and out and the defense is on the field so much.
If Nico can handle his business at quarterback, then
you took the words out of my mouth.
Tennessee's
That's what I wanted to
win 10
ask.
games.
Nico, I'm not going to butcher that last name. I practiced it, and I'm like, you know what? We're calling him Nico, and we're sticking with it. Is that where we're at in Knoxville?
No, it's Nico.
Okay,
no
great.
one says anything else. Like Tua, Nico.
Yeah, I'm like, let's not do that to ourselves. But Nico, what would you say? What do you see from him? Because, like, you look at him, and he looks like he's got the makings to be it, but do we believe he can really help Tennessee?
He disseminates information very quickly. He makes decisions very quickly. In Heupel's offense, you have to do that. Joe Milton never did that last year. He was a guy that liked to slow it down, read the whole field, set up his chessboard. You don't do that in Heupel's offense, so it was a bad fit. Nico makes decisions quickly. But against Iowa, he had 5 touchdowns, but he was 11 of 19 passing. So there is still a long way to go for Nico, and I think you'll see growing pains in the first half of the season, especially. Long term, though, I think he's an NFL quarterback. I do. He's a franchise quarterback within the next 2 years. Where is he going to be this year, though? That's the big question.
I think that experience in the bowl game kind of is something to look forward to. You give a guy like that some experience heading into this year, I think that's going to do wonders for him.
Quickly, where does Tennessee end up this year?
I think they're 9-3. I think they'll lose a game. Tennessee's system and players. I watched them in 2 different games last year, the Florida game and the Missouri game quit. And you have a lot of the same players. Different quarterback, but a lot of the same players. When you see someone who will quit, you played.
Yeah.
When you see someone that you've watched them quit on the field before, you know that it's in them at all times, and at any point in time, it could rear its head again.
And you just see the attitude in the little moments as well.
Yeah.
What about
I like the 9-3 number. I probably would have leaned 8-4, but I like the 9-3 number. I definitely think if we get Nico to play where he can, then I think the 9 number is good.
All right, we're going to take a short break here on your SEC Media Days craze. Will West, Aaron Mukes, thank you for joining me. We'll be back after a short break. Welcome back to your SEC Media Days craze. Bailey Burmaster joined by Lauren and Garrett. We're going to stick in Tennessee. We're going to talk a little bit about Vanderbilt and Tennessee. But let's start with Vanderbilt because we haven't spent a lot of time with them. Obviously, bottom of the poll here for the SEC. Clark Lee might be in a little bit of a hot spot after sporting the worst record in Power 5. What is the feeling around this Vanderbilt team that really just needs to make any type of movement in the SEC this season?
Really, there is no place to go but up. And I think that's kind of what the takeaway was yesterday. Speaking to all of them, Langston Patterson, a guy who's from Nashville, graduated from CPA, is a Vanderbilt guy through and through, basically said 2-10 is not okay. It will never be okay. We have to get better. And I think that's basically what the offseason was about. He just said it wasn't just a facelift, it was an everything lift. And that's basically what the Commodores are hoping for.
Yeah, and on top of that, Vandy went 0-8 in the SEC. Nobody wants to go over in your conference, right? So when we were talking to the guys, they took that very personally. Many of them we spoke to, and you can imagine it, right, getting recruited to an SEC school, said, I've been a winner. I'm used to winning. And so that losing season was really, really difficult, and they've been doing a lot of work this offseason to retool the entire process, from who's a leader on the team to some coaching staff additions with the offensive coordinator Tim Beck to how they're going to even present the defense on the field with Clark Lee taking over in that department. So they've really pitched this as a new look Vanderbilt team, and they're feeling optimistic about what they could accomplish.
Do you buy into it?
Garrett, I'll let you go first.
So that's the thing. You know, you mentioned the hot seat.
Yep.
And Clark Lee has a pretty proven record. You know, he was a very successful defensive coordinator at Notre Dame recently. I think this is his way of, okay, I'm going to immerse myself more in the team. And he says he's energized by it. He gets to do more of the coaching and teaching now. But I think this is his way of controlling the outcome a little bit more by being the defensive coordinator that is basically, you know, right in the muck with all of the guys. So I don't know how that'll go, because that's a really hard balance to do head coaching and defensive play calling. As for talent, you know, on the offensive side of the ball, who knows? They are basically bringing a very large portion of their roster in from New Mexico State. It's basically the Vanderbilt Aggies at this point, coming over with their offensive coordinator, Tim Beck. So I don't know how those guys will do. You know, New Mexico State did beat Auburn last year, so maybe there's a little bit of SEC magic there. But the talent is going to be the thing on offense that I watch, because you lost a pretty decent wide receiver room, truly. You know, London Humphreys going to Georgia. There's a reason the Bulldogs poached him. Will Shepard goes to Colorado. So on the offensive side of the ball, there's a lot of question marks.
Yeah, and I do buy into the fact, Bailey, that this season is going to be better for Vanderbilt. I do see that they have the pieces to be better. Of course, the bar is low. How much better, I'm not sure. I do think they could get 1 to 3 wins, potentially. You would hope, right? But I think they could potentially get 1 to 3 in the conference, based on their schedule, based on the pieces that they've gathered as well, especially when you look at the quarterback position. Garrett mentioned transfers like Nate Johnson from Utah, as well as Diego Pavia from New Mexico State there. And Coach Clark told us about guys like Blaise Berlowitz and really a deep quarterback room. And so they feel like, wow, we have this foundation for such a fantastic quarterback competition that this is only going to breed good things for us.
Well, that's the thing, is who is going to be the quarterback? At some point, too many cooks in the kitchen is a bad thing. And last year it was a bit of a carousel. You had Ken Seals, or is it going to be A.J. Swan, and back and forth.
You know what the saying is, if you have multiple quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback.
You don't have a quarterback,
right.
Exactly. And in the SEC, we know that means a big problem is coming. So I don't know who is going to be it. You know, Diego Pavia, a little bit undersized, a very gritty guy, big-time wrestler in high school, has maybe a chip on his shoulder coming over from New Mexico State. Berlowitz is much bigger. You know, you have a Nate Johnson who's coming from Utah, a very successful program in recent years. So you know, it obviously all starts with that position, but there's going to be a lot of eyes on that offense, because Clark Lee, I think you should see some progress with that defense. Can't get much worse than what it was last year.
And no winning season in the last 10 seasons. Do you believe Vanderbilt can have a winning season this year?
Honestly, I'm not sure this is the year that they get over the hump to a winning season. I think that they're just going to need a longer runway to start stacking success. And it takes a lot of coaches, right? Some time to build momentum. And based on what Vanderbilt is coming off, I mean, I think that they're looking to just start building wins and get close to a 500 season bowl contention before they look above the 500 mark at a winning record.
Last year was pretty abysmal, but the year before they won 5 games. They were knocking on the door of bowl eligibility. I don't think that a winning record is impossible. I don't think it is very likely for the most part.
The reason I would say no is because of their schedule. It's not an easy schedule. You open with Virginia Tech. You're at Georgia State, which they just hired Del McGee, who was at Georgia. He's going to try and turn that program into
very
something.
Short turnaround with that one, though.
Correct. But that's not one you can overlook if you're Vanderbilt either.
Especially if you're coming off a 2-10 year. Exactly.
Correct. At Missouri, Alabama, at Kentucky, Ball State, okay, Texas, at Auburn, South Carolina, at LSU, and then Tennessee. That's not necessarily, there's much worse SEC schedules, but that's not an easy one, especially if you're Vanderbilt.
I think the Kentucky game could be a question mark. I think the South Carolina game could be a question mark, but nothing is a given by any means. And also, Vanderbilt hasn't given everyone a reason to believe in them as of late. So, if I'm going to say they have a chance at SEC games, it's definitely those two, because you're looking at Tennessee, you're looking at Alabama, Texas. Yeah, Texas is at home, but guess what? They're still Texas, and that's going to be a tough mountain to climb.
And some of the guys were telling us yesterday that they're reveling a bit in the fact that they could play spoiler. They could be a surprise to some people. And I think that is possible when they match up with some of the more mortal SEC teams, of course, ruling out the Alabamas of the mix. But I think that could be within reach for this Commodores squad.
All right, well, let's transition to talking about the Vols. Josh Heupel, 27 wins, 3 seasons. We were just talking about this. Does he get enough love for what he's done for Tennessee?
In a volunteer state, yes, he does.
But outside of it, I don't know if he does.
I might agree with that. That in this realm that we're in right now, in the context of the entire SEC and everyone who covers the conference, I don't know that Heupel is yet viewed as a Kirby Smart or as a Nick Saban. And sure, he hasn't won the national titles to warrant that status yet, but in terms of his ascension, he is not in the conversation that perhaps they were in their ascension years.
If we're talking about Lane Kiffin in that matter, you should be talking about Josh Heupel in that matter.
There's a little bit more drama surrounding Kiffin,
well,
so I think it's a bit of a hot button.
Character,
yeah,
right?
exactly.
He's charismatic. He's probably one of the more charismatic coaches. But when you're looking at it from an analytical standpoint of what they've done for the program, I just feel like Josh Heupel doesn't get that recognition. But you say differently in Knoxville. Did they? They
all across the state,
and stretching to Nashville. Yep.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. They really do love him, and it is warranted. We've seen him really put this program back firmly on its feet now. I don't think there's really any doubt to that. I don't think that he has come away with his signature moment yet. And whether that's a national championship or something else, who knows? I do obviously think that win at Alabama at home was massive, but that was really big for the state of Tennessee. It's the postseason success that's going to come in. Now, if he makes it to a college football playoff, 365 days from now, we could be having a much different conversation, because this is a team that has the possibility to do that. Now it's just about, hey, I am as good of a coach as these other guys, and I can prove it.
And I think it'll be interesting to see what Josh Heupel can get out of the redshirt freshman quarterback, Nico Iamaleava, who is this 5-star recruit. He had all of this hype in varying categories coming into Tennessee. Right, as they call him, Coach Hypes. Perfect match there. But, I mean, Joe Milton wasn't exactly the spark plug to that Tennessee offense that Hendon Hooker was. And so you just saw moments where you were expecting this explosive play, or you were simply expecting a punch back from Tennessee. I was covering the game at Alabama last year, and the second half was just all tied. Tennessee had no answer. And so that put, I think, a bit of a damper on the Josh Heupel high-powered offense that everyone likes to talk about. And to Bailey's point, it just took a slight step down last year, and to Joe Milton's credit, I think he played as best as he could within his ability. But I think Nico could perhaps showcase all the creativity and excitement that we know Josh Heupel is capable of drawing up on offense.
And going off of that, though, what is Nico's ceiling?
That's the thing. I mean, he is a long, tall, he's pretty charismatic. He's not too loud, and the guys say he's starting to open up some, but he has all the physical tools that he needs. Just a little bit ago over in the electronic media room, Heupel was saying one of his favorite things is how he digests plays over the middle of the field. So if he has the IQ that is needed to succeed at quarterback, especially in the SEC, that's going to be, there is no ceiling. He is limitless. But physically, what I've been very pleasantly surprised with watching him is how mobile he is. He's a very tall guy, and I'm sure over the years he will put on a little bit more weight and fill out into his frame. He's still quite young, but he can move, and he is not afraid to get out and run. You know, is he going to be a guy that's going to be racking up yards constantly every game? No, I think they're going to want to try and spread the field and use the weapons that Heupel has around him. But he is close-ish to a dual threat. He will score, I'm going to say, at least 5 to 7 rushing touchdowns this year because he likes to get up and move.
Yeah, and you made an interesting point about his body, right? Because the question about his ceiling, I think, is a really tough one to answer because you're talking about a much smaller frame guy who really has not grown into being a man
no Joe Milton
physically and physiologically, yeah. Right? And so I think the fun part about college football is many of these guys, and you look at them, they do look like kids. How well can some of these much younger, smaller frame players match up with the biggest men the SEC can offer? And can you outsmart and out-athletic some of those really strong defensive fronts that you're going to see in this league? I think that's where we might learn a little bit more about what Nico's ceiling is and what he's capable of.
And on the other side of that spectrum, you have James Pierce. What do you think his ceiling is this season? We've talked about Nico being limitless but growing a little bit, not in every aspect of the game, but, I mean, James Pierce could be a guy that's on his way to the NFL.
Oh, I mean, he has already kind of punched a ticket at some point.
Yeah,
people are throwing out,
slotted in. Where
is he going to go in the draft in the first round? Where will he go in the top 15 picks? That seems to be what people are saying. There's a difference now, though. He's surprising nobody. People know who he is, how he is going to act and move and flinch and twitch on the field because there's a lot of tape on him. Unbelievable year last year. So, does Tennessee have the other guys around him towards the front to be able to draw some attention away? But also, is he going to be able to have a replicated season from his success last year?
Yeah, and James Pierce Jr., just a nightmare on the edge. We've seen so many edge rushers get big money in the NFL. So he's surely going to be one of those guys from everything we've seen, from everything we even heard today from Heupel and his teammates and how he carries himself and just the insane athletic ability that he possesses that you can't teach.
And that's going to be important, especially for their defensive backs. They had, I'm not going to say a massive revolving door or anything, but they lost some guys that were in the secondary. So if they have their front, especially a guy like James Pierce, if he comes up and plays very well, then hopefully the defense can make another stride if you're a Vols fan.
Go ahead. Yeah, and I was going to say, I don't think the Tennessee defense necessarily gets its shine, and understandably so, when the offense is the focal point of what they do. But they were second in the SEC in sacks last year. So the defense is a bit understated, but we heard from the players today and Amari Thomas, and they're looking to assert themselves to the top of the conversation a little bit when it comes to Tennessee and really be looked at as that three-level complementary football type of team where the defense can be just as imposing as the offense.
So where did the Volunteers land this year?
That's the question, because there's a lot of question marks surrounding other people. I think Ole Miss has a very good shot to be a very good football team. What happens to Alabama? You have a brand new head coach with a lot of turnover on a roster. I put us on the spot with this one.
I'll say this. I look at their schedule, and it's, let's not get it twisted. They have big matchups, right? They come to Athens, they face Kentucky, Alabama, they go to Oklahoma. Those are big games. But I look at this and say, you know, they could actually win a decent amount of these. I do think it falls somewhere around 9-3.
I would say definitely possibility of knocking on the door of 10-2. Mm-hmm. Somewhere between 3, 4, 5 in the standings, again, depending on those other question marks. But if Ian Maliava is really what they say he is, they have a definite chance to contend.
And I was going to say, I would think nightmare scenario, the worst case finish for Tennessee would be 6th. And as you mentioned, it's a byproduct of their schedule in part. And I would think best case scenario, they could finish as high as 2nd in the league, because there are a lot of games that you look at and you say, well, even if you consider the returning players that the Vols have, they should be able to take care of a lot of these opponents.
Absolutely. You know, something that's new this year is the 12-team playoff format. Are we for it or against it as football fans? Not like sports anchor reporter hat on, like as football fans, do you enjoy it?
I'm here for it. I just think that the 12-team format makes much more sense to me as a sports fan who has consumed a larger bracket, and not necessarily, I mean, you can't compare it to March Madness for college basketball, but when you think about pro sports and the way the brackets are designed and who gets a bye and playing your way into basically a quarterfinal or semifinal round, I think that's exciting. I think that's how you get the feeling that it's more of a true national champion. The 4-team playoff certainly was an upgrade from what we had before, but I think the 12-team makes much more sense, especially in the landscape of college football and the way conferences are changing so rapidly.
I am warming up to the idea. I was
He's on the other side of the spectrum. That's why we do this.
Maybe 8-team, because if you're that 12 team, sometimes there is a large gap between a top team and a 12 team.
But do you believe it leaves room for chaos?
And that's the beautiful part. And you brought up March Madness. That's a great thing to bring up, because sure, are we going to see that as much? Football and basketball, very different games, very different sports. But you never know, because an injury or a big play or whatever it might be can change everything. And at the end of the day, more is better. A lot of times we want to watch more sports, and to be able
more
to,
money.
Exactly, and to be able to incorporate more fan bases. You know, there's been a lot of times, you know, certain schools have been consistently left on the outside looking in, knocking on the door, asking to be let in, and now with 12 teams, you know, if you're a Tennessee Volunteer fan or whatever school it is, your odds are drastically higher, and it is very realistic now. You have a chance.
3 or 4 teams are probably going to make it from the SEC in that at least, and it's going to be interesting. It definitely makes the season longer, which is going to have to shift the mindset, I believe, of teams just a little bit. Georgia head coach Kirby Smart talked about that, about how they'll take it a little bit easier during preseason for the mere fact that longevity and being healthy is key, because, you know, sometimes it's not who you play, it's when you play them. So if you're losing, you know, 3 of your best players to injury because the season's a little bit longer, that's less than ideal. Who is your prediction to take the SEC this season?
I think Texas comes in, kicks the door down, and takes it. I think that
he's a Texas back guy, everybody.
I think that they will surprise, because Georgia, in my opinion, is probably the best team. But what Sark does and stuff, something in that Longhorn water, I guess, has been working very well recently. Are they the best team? No, I think Georgia's probably the best, but I still think Texas has whatever voodoo working in their way, and I think they win it this year.
I would side with the Georgia voodoo and make Georgia. I could see Alabama making a run at it again. I mean, they're bringing back quite a few guys who made an impact for them last year when people didn't think Alabama was going to make the playoff. And regardless of how contentious their spot was, they were in there. And I could see Alabama being in contention, but my pick would be Georgia.
Okay, before we go to break, who's your dark horse of the league?
Ooh.
I already brought up
Garrett's
Ole
is
Miss.
Ole Miss, right?
I like Jackson Dart. Maybe it's just his name. I don't know, but something. Lane Kiffin's got some things working over there.
His voodoo's working on you.
Yeah, hey. I think that they are a team that I would not want to play. Do I think that they're the best team? No, but some teams just stick in your side like a thorn, don't go away, and if that happens in a football game, who knows?
I could see it being Oklahoma, and for a similar reason that you were mentioning Texas. I think they have enough quality on that team that they could come into the SEC and make some noise and maybe steal a game here and there that people wouldn't expect them to, and perhaps just have a better first outing than people might think of this Oklahoma team.
I believe Oklahoma might struggle a little bit more than you're used to. I think they were the main blue blood in the Big 12. I think Brent Venables came in, I think it was 2022. They had their first losing season in the 21st century, something crazy like that. got it back on tracks. Still a very good football team. They're definitely going to win some games in the SEC. But give me Mizzou for a little dark horse. Why not? I'll buy into the hype of winning the Cotton Bowl over Ohio State and having one of the more prolific offenses. What's not to buy in for a little dark horse with Mizzou?
If I was a defensive coordinator, I would be terrified to play that offense.
Right.
That's some nightmare stuff. Luther
It really
Burden,
is.
Just phenomenal. That offense was. I got to watch it last year in person when they visited Vanderbilt, and it was literally a machine. They knew exactly where they were, when they needed to be there. It was beautiful.
And what they needed to do. That's the truth. Garrett, Lauren, thank you guys for joining us. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll return on your SEC Media Days Craze live stream. Stick with us. Welcome back into your Media Days Craze. I'm Bailey Burmaster. Day 2 officially underway. Had the opportunity to catch up with Georgia quarterback Carson Beck earlier to talk about the big reason why he returned, what the expectations for this Bulldog team is, and if they have a little bit of vengeance on their shoulder heading into this season after dropping that SEC championship to Alabama.
On anything kickoff game.
He basically said that a big reason he returned back to Georgia was for the feel and atmosphere that he felt around the team. And, you know, he wanted to come back and he wanted to do something special with those guys. But he's very special on his own, Scott. Scott joining me here to talk a little bit about everything of Day 2 SEC Media Days. Carson Beck, his poise, his composure, and his arm have just really, I think it was week 5 last year against Auburn, where he just kind of took off and really solidified himself as the next in coming of people were going, how are you going to replace Stetson Bennett? And he's definitely found his way into the groove that is the Georgia offense.
Oh, definitely. You know, first off, thanks for having me on. It's going to be a fun time. And earlier today at the press conference, this is my first time just kind of hearing Carson Beck in the flesh, and he's even more poised and confident in person than he is on the TV screen. I remember when he was just kind of coming up, battling for the job. We didn't really know if it was totally his yet, of course, because Stetson's gone. And I think he really surpassed a lot of expectations. He looks a lot beefier, too, which is pretty important for the quarterback position. And you can just tell he kind of has a little bit of the eye of the tiger. Obviously, it's not the way that Georgia wanted to end the year last year. One loss in the year, and it's in the SEC championship. And I think Carson is kind of leading these guys to have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, even though they're definitely a top team.
What did you take away from his press conference? You said you listened into it. Any nuggets come out and you were like, that's what I want to remember about this?
It was just the fact that, like, I mean, there's been so many questions all week long about this college football video game, but, like, this answer he gave me was, like, kind of the most unique in a sense. He was like, look, I don't care about the rating, like, on the game. Like, I'm going to rate myself in real life. But just the way he kind of said it, his attitude, the kind of body language, that's the kind of things I like to see out of a quarterback. Body language, facial expressions, not just what you say out of the mouth.
Well, he said it earlier, too, when we were talking about, you know, just different aspects of what the outside noise might be. And he goes, no one out there is going to say anything about me that I haven't said 10 times worse to myself. And I related to that because I think I'm very much like that. But when you see that and you hear that from your biggest player on your team who you're hoping is going to take you to the national championship, that is the type of thing you want to hear, especially in college football where the right quarterback is everything.
Oh, that is 100%. And, you know, another thing I think, too, is that he's got so many weapons to use, but he's really grown into his own to where it's not like the quarterback's going to be what beats you, right? He leads this team. It's not like he's going to, you know, cost his team by being an unsafe guy. He's definitely picked up a lot of skills. Loses a couple targets, of course, with the tight end Brock and Ladd McConkey, wide receiver. But, you know, just having that year of experience as well, I think it really helps the younger guys who are coming into it all.
All right, we're going to take a short break here on your Media Days Craze. Stick with us. We're going to have a lot more coming up after the break. Welcome back to your Media Days craze. Bailey Burmaster. I'm now joined by Chris Doring, college football analyst, former Gator receiver, spent time in the league. What are days like today like for you coming back to some SEC
awesome.
Nation?
I love it. It's great for a couple reasons. One, it's the signal of the unofficial start of football season, and it means it's right around the corner. But I think, too, this is a celebration in a way. Getting a chance to see Oklahoma and Texas here for the first time, talking about how many teams from the SEC may be able to qualify for an expanded 12-team playoff. It just seems like there's a lot of juice. And I know there's a lot of negativity about NIL stuff and transfer portal stuff and all the uncertainty about the congressional decisions and how finances are going to work in the future. Today, this week, I feel like it's only been about football, and it's been a lot of connection with this league and a lot of anticipation for this season, despite all of those things going on.
What do you make of the new look SEC? 16 teams, no more divisions, and then you're adding the former Big 12 blue bloods in Texas and Oklahoma.
I like it because it's symmetrical. 16 teams feels like a nice balanced kind of number. But I also, I got some sadness about the loss of the divisions. I was playing in the league in '92 when we broke up into the Eastern and Western divisions, and so seeing that go away is a little sad. But I think it's exciting because with Texas and Oklahoma coming in, we inherit the Red River rivalry.
Yep.
We got some old rivalries being renewed again with Texas A&M, OU and Missouri, Arkansas and Texas. So that'll be fun. But I'm curious as to, we're not playing the divisions anymore, so some of the familiar games within the league will go away. But what new teams are going to become rivals? When I was here in the early 90s, Florida and Tennessee didn't play much before the divisions got split up. And then all of a sudden, Tennessee and Florida playing every year, the two best teams in the league. It became an instant rivalry. So what games are going to develop between traditional SEC teams? And then also, how about Georgia going to Austin? Or
That's the one everyone has circled.
Yeah, I mean it's exciting to think about what some of these new rivalries and the anticipation fans have for going to Norman and to Austin in the future.
What teams are you paying attention to in the SEC this year?
Surprise teams? I mean, I think we're all.
Give me a little bit of a mixture. The ones you typically want to pay attention to, but maybe someone who's a dark horse as well.
Yeah, well, Georgia obviously is at the top there. It's interesting to think about what Alabama will be without Nick Saban, and Kalen DeBoer is a great replacement. So how long does it take them to get up to speed? I'd say, one of the great storylines is Missouri and Ole Miss last year doing what they did, 11-win seasons for each of them. How do they back that up with another opportunity here to maybe do the same and compete for a national championship? And then who's going to be this year's version of Missouri? They were picked 6th in the East last year.
Went unranked, and then they're in the Cotton Bowl beating Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great story and a great example of what you can do to kind of come out of nowhere and establish yourself as a real legitimate contender in college football. So I think Tennessee could be one of those teams. They're predicted to win 8.5 games. I think they win 10 games. I don't think Florida gets to the point where they're in the playoff conversation, but I do think 4.5 wins is way too low. I think they probably win 7 this year. And then what about Kentucky? We don't even talk. Nobody's really talking about Kentucky.
No, that is very valid. No one is talking about Kentucky
and usually, Kentucky's talked about as maybe the second best team in the East, or a team that can kind of surprise some folks. They've had two 10-win seasons, I think, in the last 6 years, but really haven't been able to break through. So I think, especially with what happened with Missouri last year, Kentucky fans are like, what about us? It's our turn.
Well, and they have Brock Vandegrift, too.
Yeah, I mean, you got a new offensive coordinator. You got a new quarterback. But I think Coach Stoops is resigned to getting back to being that physical team that they've kind of become under him. He's the most tenured coach in the SEC, which is crazy to think about. But I really do think they know who they are. And I think sometimes when they're not being talked about, those are the best years that Kentucky has.
You brought up Florida. I want to talk about Florida. How do you evaluate where they are right now, and how hot is Billy Napier's seat right now?
It's frustrating. I think he inherited a little bit of a challenge, and I think that he's done a great job in narrowing the gap in talent differential from where some of the top teams are and where Florida is. 25% of their defensive snaps last year came from true freshmen, and that's a recipe for some growing pains, which they struggled through. They did a nice job of going out in the transfer portal and bringing in some veteran experienced guys. I'm a big fan of Graham Mertz. I think Graham Mertz is not talked about enough for what he did.
Which is interesting because I feel like I've gauged different people, and some people are like, I mean, he is what he is, but I feel like
anybody that says that has not watched what he did. Now, and I did the spring game this year, and I did their spring game last year.
Okay.
And when he came to Gainesville, I asked Coach Napier. I said, why are we going out to get Graham Mertz. I mean, didn't really excite anybody at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
He said, well, the things that he's going to be able to do in our offense fit his skill set. Going out of shotgun. They never went out of shotgun at Wisconsin. It's better for him to see the field, better for him to be able to get the ball out. And in this offense, we give him just about every play a tag at the end to allow him to check to get to the best play possible. He's one of the smartest guys that Coach Napier's ever been around. So, putting trust in him out on the field to make sure Florida's in the right play at all times is something I think he's been tasked with. And I think, one of his, not that it's his duty, but he's accepted it, and that's being a mentor for DJ Lagway. DJ Lagway, the friendship that those two guys have and the respect that they have for one another is pretty cool, and I think it's going to benefit Lagway and his development considerably.
We only have you for a short time, so I wanted to ask you this. During your time at Florida, you started as a walk-on. How do you feel like NIL has changed the experience for a walk-on?
Well, I think the thing that I'm most worried about is the potential elimination of walk-ons. I mean, that was kind of the conversation we were having back in May after, Congress's ruling, and how do you handle all the different budgetary issues and things like walk-ons. It's part of the fabric of college football. I was a walk-on back in the day, but more recently Stetson Bennett. The seasons that he had, 2 national championships. Look, Cody Schrader last year, a walk-on that went for over 1,000 yards. Texas A&M, their whole 12th man thing is based upon normal students in the student body coming out and helping on special teams. So that's the thing that I am most concerned about, is just making sure that guys that may be overlooked have an opportunity to chase their dreams, and what those guys do, even if they don't ever step on the field, the appreciation for being a part of a team is important.
That is absolutely correct. I was a walk-on myself, so I had to ask that. I was very curious.
There's a walk-on bond.
You get it.
It was initially something I was ashamed of, but I embrace it now because it's part of what made me who I am.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you for joining us.
It's
We're going to take a short break on Media Days. Craig, stick with us. We'll be right back.